Am I being quiet or are y'all being quiet?
No,
You're giving the
you're the one
intro.
you're doing the intro. We're being quiet, so there's a clean lead in.
Welcome to SplunkTalk, a Splunk podcast that is all Splunk and no junk. I'm your host, Hal, here with co-host Birch, and in the hot seat we have Jeremy. Say hello.
Hello.
Or motion, hello, whatever. This is episode 6, and we joined today by guest Arijit Mukherji, CTO and co-founder of SignalFx. That will be very exciting. Before we get to that, let's kind of go around the room, see what y'all been up to. Birch, you go first. What's up, man?
Oh man, so some fun news. By the time first off, we're not live streaming, so let's first just acknowledge that.
We did last
It's a sad
time.
day.
We did, yeah. But we went to live stream today, and it appears that we're using some super cool new certificates. And those sweet 2048 or higher certificates are just too cool for Google. So live stream is off for today. We'll look into future options. But yeah, so by the time people watch this, I'll have a new role at Splunk.
Aha.
What is that going to be?
I am, as of February 1st, I'll be moving into the products organization.
Hey,
cool.
nice.
Yeah. So I'll be doing technical guidance for the new field PM organization. And
Awesome.
so what the person running
What is
that
a field
organization,
PM organization?
I'm glad you asked. So this is a brand new organization at Splunk that is in place to help make sure that everything that the systems engineers, the sales engineers, the customer success managers, the people that are really day in and day out working with customers, we're able to stay true to what they need and what our customers need in shaping our product. So we're helping inform the direction of product as a cross-functional or horizontal part of the organization. And so an example of that is like within this new group is the upcoming Splunk Ideas, a new feedback and enhancement platform.
That sounds really boring. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Because actually earlier today, I was telling a customer about some things that are coming related to feature enhancements. And this has actually been a long time customer request.
Yeah.
So it's a request about customer requests.
Very meta.
Yeah.
So I won't be responsible for that project specifically.
JC is your boss? One of the JCs? We have 3 JCs at the company?
Yeah, we do have 3 JCs.
Okay, yeah. All right, cool.
And 2 of them have a birthday a day apart.
I did not know that part.
Yeah, and those same 2 I affectionately refer to as my work husband and my work mistress.
I know which one is which. I immediately knew which one is which as soon as you said that.
But yeah, so a lot of love all around.
You're talking about the New York JC is your boss.
That's right.
Okay.
Gotcha. Someone who's been on our in our targets for a future guest.
Oh yeah. Well, your work mistress is also excellent speaker.
Anyone with the initials JC would be more than welcome as a guest.
Jeremy, what are your initials?
Are we going to get Jesus on the show? Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, let's aim high and see what we can do.
Yeah. High and holy.
Yeah. No, mine is JK. Just kidding.
That's not very funny.
I thought it was pretty clever.
Keep working on it. Keep your day job, though. Any changes in your job this year?
I can't take credit. It's all my parents.
JK.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Any changes in your job situation this year? What's up with you?
Yes. There is a very big change in my job situation. I will not be working half the year because I'm taking on a new role of fatherhood.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So which half of the day are you going to be working and which half are you going to be fathering?
Yeah, exactly. No, I intend to make full use of Splunk's extremely generous parental leave. So I will be taking some time off starting sometime in June. Depending on when the baby actually decides to come.
Depending on when the download happens, yeah.
That's right.
I understand the mechanics involved.
Yeah, so come June, we're gonna have to we're gonna have to find. I don't know that we can find a replacement or an alternate for you, but I heard that there's like a fresh version of you coming to the world in June. Maybe they want to fill your spot on this.
I think he's easily replaced, so we can talk about it offline.
But as I
we'll
mentioned
just
before we started recording,
I've got three
can
people
we?
in mind.
Oh, guys,
We just,
three people. Can we
hey guys, we
possibly
burned
find
through another
someone-
producer.
Or maybe I stick around and just bring her on the show while I'm on leave, and she can steal the whole thing and
Open
she'll become an
invitation, man.
Yeah.
internet celebrity.
I like it. Cool. Well,
New Splunk mascot.
what else has been going on with y'all? Anything? I didn't talk. I guess I
Yeah.
could
What
say
about
something.
you, Hal?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Let's see.
Yeah,
So I mean, it
Hal,
is the
what about
time
you?
for change in the company, because our fiscal thing and everything starts and gets ready end of January, 1st of February. Let's see. My role is changing slightly. They are putting a new sales engineer type of role. They're kind of splitting out some of the responsibilities, and I'm going to be a consulting solutions engineer. Is the new title, but basically a specialist in some of our products, but still field facing.
Nice. Which suite of products, if you will?
The IT suite of products, or half, if you will.
Nice.
So yeah, looking forward to it. Should be cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, in any second now, we'll have our special guest joining us.
Yeah.
So, if just a little background, Splunk acquired SignalFx some time ago, and our guest is a member of that.
Well, not just a member,
acquisition,
but
right?
let's we'll talk through it with him. Of course, that will be a lot of fun.
So, who likes dead air?
I'm actually a fan, and normally there's not a problem. Like I can fill air, no problem. That's just it's one of those things that, like, after you've spoken publicly for a while, it's like you can just like flip a switch. But the thing is that, like, you don't know if you're going to be saying anything useful or it's just going to be babble,
Yeah.
But
For me, it's mostly babble. We got
during my own personal period of dead silence a moment ago, I was sending a note to Arijit to check on him, and he's on the way. So we will be speaking with him momentarily.
Very cool. Well, this is a great time to, knowing that he's joining any second, let's now get into some intense conversation.
You mean something that he could be interrupting just as soon as he joins?
Yeah. Let's talk about something like political. Like, do you feel that Splunk's web interface or configuration file backend is better?
I actually am looking forward to not talking about that. But have y'all seen the new dashboard framework? Have y'all seen the new dashboard framework?
A little bit. It was the way they were doing the dashboards for the Buttercup Bucks at Conf. They were using
correct.
At the dashboard control room. Very rich.
Yeah. And Jeremy, have you seen it at all?
I want to say I have seen a few screenshots. Maybe I haven't actually seen it in front of me or anything.
So we should definitely have probably one of the senior PMs over that area on to talk about it. It might be an interesting conversation, but it's a very visual one. So I don't know. We'll have to think about that. Yeah. But the short version is that we've had the same dashboard. Well, we've had two dashboard frameworks, 3, 2.5, 3.
Back in 4.3 days.
I mean, you had simple XML and advanced XML. And there was also this Python-based backend, and you had this, what was the other one called? It wasn't, before we tried to stick, I can't remember. It was basically a templating
Django.
engine. Yeah, we
Django.
briefly had that Django in there. But, then the story became, how do we simplify this for people, and what is going to be useful? And we didn't, during that process, we never changed the look of it. It was basically the capabilities were all the same. So when it came to refresh things, we, this time around with the new dashboard framework, we did. So the capabilities are much broader. You can have like kind of pixel perfect layout wherever you want, and the ability to kind of control the look and the feel is just drastically improved. So there's a lot of cool stuff there, and it doesn't look like a stale old dashboard type of thing.
Yeah, because after you're looking at a number of Splunk dashboards, it's got very like column and row based orientation, and it's great. But to your point, I bet after looking at so many of them, it's kind of like you're seeing the same thing over and over. And what I saw, the new framework is just totally flexible. I
Mhm.
mean, things can go anywhere visually on it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Did I ever tell you about when I was like really heavy into advanced XML
No,
and
you
Splunk
did
5
not.
was coming out?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
story time. Put
Okay.
on your hat. Back in I think 2013, 14.
The way you set that up, it was like you
I was
had
telling
some
it no matter
drug
what.
problem
You would be surprised. You would not be surprised. Let me tell you
back
that.
when I was really heavy into that XML stuff.
Yeah, man. Back when I was into advanced XML. So I was trying to do some pretty advanced XML kind of things, and it was a very if you're not familiar with XML, it was a lot to learn. A lot of nesting, a lot of weird ways of closing, and I was getting really heavy into it and trying to pull off a cool solution with like configuration management. And I went to .conf and the preceding Splunk University, where I was able to take some classes, and I took a class on advanced dashboards, and we went further into advanced XML, and I started asking the instructor like, well, how do I do this one thing, or what is this module called? And he finally got exasperated, and he's like, I don't know the answer, and after tomorrow it won't matter. I was like, what? And he's like, we're announcing Splunk 5 tomorrow, and it's going to have a much richer dashboard experience. Simple XML is going to be really enhanced. And so everything that you're trying to do is going to be just a few clicks in the new thing. So you might as well just wait until tomorrow. And I was like, but I want an answer. Okay, fine.
Well, to be fair, that transition took a lot longer than version 5. And people continued to build things with advanced XML because the feature parity was not there at version 1 of simple XML.
Yeah, I think even forms didn't come along until like 6 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it took a while. And then we announced the deprecation of advanced XML, and that was a good thing. I don't think anybody really complained. But now the new hotness. We showed it off at Conf. You can find links and videos and stuff at the Conf Online website.
And there's a beta.
You can download the beta. Right, exactly. So there's an app in Splunk base. I think it's called like Splunk Dashboard Beta or something like that. It runs on version 7.3 or 8.0. And it says beta, but it's not. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. It's not the type of thing that's going to break, or lead to instability in your environment. It's merely a front end thing that we're calling beta because it's not finished. It's going to change some. So,
and to your point, it's not like it's going to impact your old dashboards in any way, because it's a whole new engine. So it sits parallel to your existing dashboards. So that's a really good point, Holly. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure I'm going to promise this, and then someone's going to turn around and be like, "It broke." No, there shouldn't be a way, though.
No, low impact for sure. Were you going to say something, Jeremy?
Yeah, is it the same stuff that's rolling out with mission control?
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll see this in a lot of things. Mission control, which was announced at Conf as well, is basically the future of what we are going to be doing on the security side. So kind of bringing in capabilities from enterprise security, Phantom, UBA into kind of one place. And yes, the visualization framework for that and the look and feel of it looks a lot different. That is using the new dashboard framework.
Okay. And this is probably, I don't think we've ever talked this much about like future facing stuff. So this is probably
everything we're talking about has been already talked about at Conf. So that's why I feel comfortable with that level of detail. Otherwise, I would be freaking out right now and I'd be saying like, Jeremy, not cool. Not cool, Jeremy.
This is we can fix it in post. It's fine.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I'll say the usual our usual disclaimer is, this stuff is out there. It's subject to change, especially that's why we put the beta tag on there. anything that we're talking about that might be, forthcoming and not yet available, hey,
Thanks,
that's still subject to
lawyer.
change. And,
Thanks, lawyer talk.
make your
It's
purchasing
not lawyer
decisions
talk.
based on what's
This is
available
Splunk
today.
talk. Thank you.
We should change the name to Lawyer Talk.
Birch.
Every time we'll have someone from legal as a guest.
That sounds like an awful idea. That is a truly awful idea. We should do it once though, just for fun, like April 1st. We'll be
April
like,
Fools.
hey guys, this is Lenny Stein. He is formerly our chief counsel.
I'm going to pretend to be a lawyer. Ask me a question.
Well, now I'm speechless.
Okay, so anytime you ask a question.
So hey Birch, what
Yeah,
did you have
so-
for breakfast this morning?
Oh, I can't confirm or deny that I had breakfast this morning, and I plead the fifth.
I see.
That'll be the answer to every question, regardless of if it's appropriate, just for the fun of it.
Okay. Have you ever, like, this is totally way off topic, have any of you ever like had to really seriously deal with contract language?
Yes.
Yeah. Like I've done some real estate stuff, and occasionally I touch the contract side on the Splunk sales, and that's like, I get it why lawyers get paid a lot. It takes a long time to put your head in that space.
Speaking of head in that space, we just got a new head in the visual space here.
We did.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Now, I want to be very careful and to not mispronounce your name, Arijit. So could you do us the honor?
Yes, it's Arijit Mukherji.
Okay. Actually, guys, did I not say it very similarly?
Yeah, you were pretty good.
You were 95% right, and it's just that 5% that was so offensive.
I don't want to. Yeah. So, hey, Arijit, I'm Hal, and to my left there is Birch, and then on the bottom we've got Jeremy.
Hi, Hal.
Hello.
So, thanks so much for giving us the time here. Super appreciate you coming on. So, I think Jeremy will cut out like a minute here just to give him a decent runway here. So what we do is we're talking to the world. It is a public facing. We don't work with marketing at all, but they know that we exist. So there's no agenda. There's no marketing campaigns. There's nothing between us. But they're aware that we do stuff. Which is nice.
I won't get my 15 minutes of fame.
Well, see,
just joking.
Well, the funny thing is that like there are things that we want to do, and that we just haven't gotten there yet. So today we have the freedom. So, but when I click the publish button, or one of us clicks the publish button, it's out there immediately. So, and we have things on YouTube, we have things, in Apple Podcasts and other podcast app. So it's out there, whenever we're ready. We don't have to go through these approval cycles, and
I think that makes a lot of sense. I actually checked out some of the previous episodes. Seems like some very interesting discussions. Yeah.
Oh, great.
We try. So, but the history of this, SplunkTalk's been around a long time, but it paused when we had some, the main host at the time, Michael Wild, was kind of the soul of it. He left the company and was like, you know what, we got to make this thing happen again. Birch was really interested, had some customers hit me up. So here we are.
You made it sound like I was really interested and started a campaign to have customers hit you up and sell you on me.
Yes, thank you for your lobbying over a year that really paid off. No, we don't take ourselves very seriously at all. So I hope you can roll with that, guys.
No
anything
problem.
else
It's
to say?
from me on that side.
Excellent. Birch, Jeremy, anything you want to say?
Oh, let's have some fun.
Yep,
Let's do
that's
it.
the goal. So let's see. I did the intro to the last episode. Did we introduce ourselves? Yeah, we did for this one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting mixed up with what we did
okay.
for Charlie and what we did for today. All right, cool. So, marker, Jeremy. So we want to welcome Arijit Mukherji. Did I do okay, Arijit?
That's right, Mukherji. Right. Yes.
Awesome. So welcome to the show. And what we want to do is kind of understand what brought you to where you are today. So, but let's go back a little ways to, little Arijit. No, I don't want to go back that far. So what I want to understand is like, what did you do kind of college time frame? What were you studying? What were you interested in back then?
Cool. So I've always been sort of fond of computers, so to speak. So I think if I can trace it back, it was really sixth grade when in my school they offered what was called a computer studies course. Basically taught you about computers and taught you about basic programming, if you remember that language. And so my dad, who was sort of pretty key to sort of maybe encouraging this interest, so he got me, there was a home computer called the ZX80.
Yeah.
Or the ZX Spectrum. Anyway,
Yeah, in the back of my mind, I was like, which one is he going to mention?
There you go. So I spent like hours and hours and hours on that. And then, fast forward, when I graduated from high school, I did want to do computer science as a thing that I studied. But out there, the college, it's really a competitive exam that everybody writes. And then based on your rank, you get to choose. And it's sort of the first person chooses, and one department gets filled. The next ones are available, and that's how it went. So I got the second best thing, which is
where was
electronics and communication engineering.
You said over there. Were you implying like?
Back in India. So I went. Okay. I grew up in India. I went to school in India. Anyway, so I got electronics and communication engineering, which is kind of pretty darn close. So learned a lot of similar things, and then when I did my master's, I came over to the US. I went to UC Davis, which is actually pretty close by to here. That's where I moved over to computer science, and then been a software guy ever since.
So one thing I heard a number of things, but one thing that stood out to me is you mentioned like the top of the class gets first pick when they do the exam, and everyone does the same exam, and they get first pick. And your first pick was computer science, but you didn't get that. Right. So what you're telling us is that you are not the top of the class.
Oh, no, by any means.
Well, I've heard of this before. This is something that, how many thousands of people are in line for this process?
Yeah, so the college I went to, it's actually considered, I guess, the equivalent of India's version of MIT. It's called IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. There used to be 5 campuses, each taking about maybe 400 kids each year for undergrad. And I think the net number of people who wrote the exam is probably 150,000 or so.
Oh.
And then you probably had to be within 300 and something to score a computer science department slot in one of the 5.
So relatively,
it's very hard.
You actually were top of the population.
Yeah, no, the competition and the stress involved.
It's very intense. It's very stressful. Yeah. Yes. So since then, actually, what the country has done is realizing obviously that good education is important. They have brought a lot other universities into the IIT folds by upgrading them and have facilities and curriculum and so now I think there's, just as the country has blossomed, there's far more options now, but it used to be somewhat different. I guess this was 1992.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So flash forward a little bit to you're studying computer science after, and you're interested in software. Was there a particular, topic or some focus that you found interesting, because the world of software itself is very wide?
Yeah,
we know where you landed, and I'm trying to figure out why did you?
It's like we have the spoiler, we have the end of the movie, and now we're going back and watching.
That's right. Back in school, like in 6th grade, when we had computer studies, actually, it's interesting. So the teacher asked all the students, like, hey, what would you like to do if you learn how to program? And almost 80% of the class said, write video games.
Yeah.
And you might assume that the teacher is going to be disappointed, but our teacher was very happy. He said, you know what? If you guys can actually go and write video games, I'll be the happiest teacher in the world, because it's one of the hardest things to do.
Was there one kid in the class who went, write enterprise software?
That's right. Like that's going to happen. Anywho, so I don't know. I don't consider myself a very, I guess, an artistic person. I've always been more about the mechanical. So in terms of software, I did not have a very specific preference, but it was probably going to be something where there wasn't a whole lot of user-facing stuff to some extent. So I was mostly interested in back-end guy. Yeah, coincidentally, since we're on the topic, when you go to school, especially in California and near the Silicon Valley, it's fashionable to love Linux, and it's fashionable to hate on Microsoft, because this was back in the day when Internet Explorer was kind of steamrolling Netscape Navigator, and a bunch of stuff was happening. Antitrust was going on. And guess what? The first job I got after graduating and loving Linux was to write Windows programming, write Windows-based software. It ended up being pretty cool.
MVP.
There you go.
Right there. So I was on that side of the camp for a long time.
Yeah, I had a few MSDN subscriptions and attended some WinHack conferences. So I remember those days. I ended up finding out that this wasn't bad, that it was very well supported, good documentation. So, my opinion evolved, obviously, as a result of this experience.
Well, it's funny. I feel like people make their minds up first, and then they apply to what they've already decided. And that OS platform is the same way. You have a bundle of features, and you can do very roughly equivalent across any of these different platforms. And, to some extent, it's preference. There's a lot of things that might be easier on one or another. There might be, but a lot of it is, it's like, yeah, the way that Linux evolved is because of the people that were involved in writing it. The way that Windows evolved is because of the people that were involved in what. So you gravitated toward one camp or another because of who, what you liked. It was a preference. So I just like software, and I think you can do all kinds of cool things across a wide variety of places. So,
see, it was different for me when I was born. I was held up over the mountain like Simba in Lion King.
Yeah.
And
I can imagine.
All below me were machines, not animals, but all machines running OS2 Warp. And because my father worked for IBM, and so I was ingrained to become an OS2 Warp programmer, and then that operating system doesn't exist anymore.
No, it does not. I too was into OS2 for a time, but so Arijit, like at what point did you start to do things that were related to, where you went with SignalFx? Where does that evolution start?
Yes. So back in Cisco, I did things entirely unrelated to it. But then at some point, I think it was back in 2007. So my wife was in India for an extended period of time, just having a vacation. She was between jobs. And I had a whole lot of time. So I decided to apply to this company called Facebook, which wasn't really, I didn't know much about it. I knew a friend had gone. Yeah, maybe. And so anyway, so that's kind of where I joined the company. And what they asked me to do, along with I think 2 or 3 other people.
This was 2007? Yeah, sorry, 2007.
That's right.
So just to like, for anyone who's younger and listening, like I remember I was sorry guys, I was graduating college. I was a year out of college in 2007, but I remember Facebook approaching me and saying, we're jobs and do you want to apply? And I was like, man, the engine, the platform that Facebook runs on right now is so crude, and it was like at that time it had grown so fast, and they were still using a very antiquated like engine and platform.
That's right.
It wasn't as dynamic and user friendly as it is now, and I just remember being like, I don't want to go near that.
That's right. It was all PHP, and I felt.
I was just going to say, now you've got people all over the place snapping up React developers like hotcakes.
That's right.
So,
we were just in a discussion, like within our team, we want to migrate some of our product into React, and I've been sort of following that development too. But anywho, so I joined Facebook, and like you said, yes, it was written on PHP, and it was not really a sort of, it was sort of all over the place. The company was growing. At that time, actually, MySpace used to be the big gorilla, because they were at least 3 times as big, and Facebook was just like relatively small, very popular among the college students, of course, but not much more than that. So anyway, because of that growth, they wanted to do better monitoring and operations. And they were using a bunch of open source that was kind of not really working out very well. And they felt, well, a lot of the employees came from companies like Google, where Google obviously always has been a sort of leader in terms of their thinking about how they operate and whatnot. And Google obviously spent a lot of effort and engineers and money on this thing called Borgmon, which was used to sort of monitor the Borg infrastructure, which is their version of, I guess, what Kubernetes eventually is emulating in some sense. And so that's what we did. We ended up writing.
That came later, but yeah.
Yep.
Hal is, for those on the audio only stream, Hal is showing us what a book is.
Oh, thank you. No, I should have read it. Thank you very much. This is site reliability engineering, how Google runs production systems. So very well known in the industry.
Yes. Yeah, so that's how we got started. We built a monitoring system, and then we found out that it was kind of a useful thing. Engineers loved it. And, there's always, you want to use something that's developed in-house. So there's a little bit of that unfair advantage you get, but then you get all the feedback and, like everything else in the company, the scale, the service had to scale like really, really fast. So it was a really fantastic experience. And because it was an internal team, we were the product managers as well as the developers. Everybody would come to us and say, hey, I need this, or this product sucks because of that. And so it evolved and gave us a lot of perspective. So that's kind of how I got started in this space. And then Fast Track, a few years, 2013, one of my coworkers, Phil Liu, he was also a member of this infrastructure team. And then he decided that I'm going to go start a company around this. And he reached out to me and I said, you know what, if you're going to start the company, I'm going to join. So he and our other co-founder, Karthik Rao, they got together through Andreessen Horowitz and started the company. And I joined them as the first employee. And so I've been with the company, SignalFx, since the beginning, effectively.
Neat.
And
Neat.
what was your title just prior to acquisition? Was it CTO?
Prior to acquisition, I was the CTO. That's correct.
So,
yes,
I mean, you were employee number one. What was that like? I mean, you had been at a big company, very big company, and
right.
were you hired at Facebook out of college, or do you had some other experiences?
No. I
were
was
at Cisco
there in
for a while
Cisco
too.
for many years. So, so when I joined Facebook, it was actually quite small.
Okay.
Maybe a net of 400 employees, less than 100 engineers.
Okay.
And so the whole engineering effectively knew each other. It was kind of small, growing fast, of course. So I kind of really liked it because I think two things did it for me as far as that experience is concerned. One is just the fact that it's a smaller company, just feels more dynamic when things grow and you feel more in the loop and you see your impact to the company much more so than if you're in a larger organization, for sure. The other thing is I was in what's effectively like product or device development back in Cisco, where I used to work on voice over IP and later on like virtualization, but our products were sold, like they were packaged software or packaged devices that the customer would buy. So it was like a 1 year long like cycles. And Facebook being a website which didn't even charge anybody, like you could update the site every day. And so just the speed at which you could move was just mind blowing. And it's like drugs. Like once you get used to it, not that I have tried it, but once you get used to it, like you don't want to get back. And so to me, that was a great experience. So when I joined SignalFx, like just having that experience on an even smaller environment, and then seeing not just the engineering work develop, but also just the life of the company and what it takes to sort of go raise funds and try to find the first customer and how do you do marketing. Like just getting exposed to that was pretty awesome. So anyway.
So I was just saying, prior to the Splunk acquisition, what was the growth of the SignalFx company size during you were employee number one?
So we grew pretty fast. So I think by the time we got acquired, which is about 6 years into the life of the company, we were about, give or take, 250 employees, about 80 in R&D and product management, and the rest in sales, marketing, and various other function support, and so on. So we were, the first, maybe I would say 3 years or so, we grew slowly, right? So, we were maybe about 40 people by the end of maybe 2016 or so, and then around 2016 or so, and then we started growing quicker because once the product got into the market, then obviously you need to sort of grow the related functions, and this is obviously a very competitive field, and so so that side of the business blossomed.
Right.
So one thing I've always, it's like a black box to me is how do you go from working on this functional area at a company to starting a company working in that same functional space without just getting sued until you're bankrupt? I mean, are you, you know what I mean? Like, are you taking
totally get
any
what you mean.
IP and how do people start their own companies like that?
That's a great question. That's a very, very good question. We did it because
asking for a friend, not that I'm looking to leave.
Of course, without a doubt. We did it because, and this is actually what was the most fun part of being at SignalFx, was we actually did things very differently. So we did not build the same thing again, which is where you might run into a lot of these concerns. we said, look, we've done this for a few years. We've seen what worked and we've seen what didn't work. We've seen, what. So we all had in our mind, we had formed an opinion on what does the so-called perfect or a better or much better monitoring system look like. And then we decided to go and attack that, like shoot for the moon, right?
Oh, okay.
And so the way we implemented SignalFx was like very different, a different architecture. And so there was no question of overlap of implementation, so to speak. I think you were going to ask a question. I can.
No.
Well, just
pay no attention to the chat, by the way.
Right.
So just clarifying, like, in a sense, it's that you went off and you said, look, we built this thing at Facebook for Facebook and their very specific environment. But if we want to solve the same concept, we're now talking about solving it for a much larger scope.
That is
much
correct.
globaler environment. Yes.
Yeah, let's go with that. A globaler environment. By the way, guys, we're starting a company. Right. It's called Globler.
Yes. So, one of the things we did is after the company got started, we went and spoke to a bunch of the big, because observability monitoring is something it's kind of important. And what we found is the technology leaders in the space, like the Googles, the Netflix, the LinkedIns, the Twitters, what have you, like all of these guys, Facebooks, they all actually have their own homegrown systems. They spend lots of engineers, they spend buy thousands of servers, and they do this because they know this one of their differentiators, how they can scale and operate efficiently. But in terms of open source of what's out there, if you're not one of those guys, it's very little, right? And so what we found is, all of these companies we went and talked to, we found that philosophically, there were certain things or certain ways they all looked at it. It's just the path or the implementations for achieving those goals were different. So we knew that at least if we hit all those points about, being able to, for example, in our case, collect data from a diverse environment, have a very scalable store where you can store all of this, have a well-defined query language where you can query this and do advanced analytics, have some kind of way to do alerting. The principles were the same, the implementations were different. So what we did on top of that, we decided, it ended up working out very well, is we realized, look, speed is always preferable. Everybody wants answers quicker, faster. What if instead of doing that, we turn the model upside on the head, and instead of having a database where you run queries from, what if you had an end-to-end streaming architecture, which was unprecedented in this space, speaking of not getting sued for patents. And we invented such a streaming architecture, which give us almost real-time response, for example, within 2 to 3 seconds, regardless of the size of whatever infrastructure you're monitoring. And that ended up being a huge, huge deal. And that's actually continues to be a very key differentiator for us. It's the reason why we got a bunch of patents in this space, in spite of, there being other products.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's one of the most fun things to work on and help invent.
So I want to dive more into scale in a minute, but I wanted to go back to a word that you said that we really need to hear your definition of, and that's observability. So can you kind of set the stage for observability?
Yes.
Globler.
Global observability. Yes, let's do that. It's really observability means you're in a complex environment and you want to be able to reason about it or to understand what's going on in it. So it's slightly different from monitoring, and let me explain what I think monitoring is, and then we can get into observability. So monitoring typically means that you're looking out for things that you might go wrong. So for example, a Nagios check is a perfect example. I know this port must be up. I'm going to run a probe every minute, and if it's down, then I know something is bad. So I'm looking for things that might go wrong. But fast forward to now, and when you're in Kubernetes and containers and microservices, there are so many of those things that it is extremely hard for me to predict and guess every way it's going to fail. That just doesn't work. And so what then you need to do is, instead of measuring the temperature, you probably you do in a hospital bed, you're always measuring somebody's pulse. And so you keep on collecting telemetry and you store them so that if the unexpected issues occur, that you have the data and you have the ability to analyze and slice and dice it to figure out what happened, because you cannot potentially predict every possible thing and look out for every possible thing. So that's how observability slightly differs from monitoring. It's a broader scope. Obviously, monitoring, alerting is a big part of it, but it's not all. The idea is really sort of getting a globaler data set
Mhm.
from your whole environment, storing it in there for the case when you're going to need it, because that's really the name of the game.
Okay. And coming from a world where, and maybe a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, which is Splunk, and frequently we are talking with people about log messages. So,
Mhm.
observability means more than just log messages.
Yes.
What does it mean as far as
That's great. So it's a good question. So I mentioned like collecting telemetry from everybody. So what telemetry are we collecting, right? So there's one way to look at it. You can consider observability to be based on what we call like the three pillars or the three types of data, right? They being logs, of course, which is the oldest source of telemetry that all our systems have been sending, and which is what Splunk excels at. Then there's metrics. Metrics are numerical measurements as opposed to textual like log measurements. For many cases, when you're measuring like, I don't know, CPU and memory and disk or an application's latency or error rate and whatnot, a lot of those things are ideally suited for numbers, and the numbers are better because they're far more compact. They're cheap to collect, cheap to send. You can keep them for a long time. So they're just a more efficient vehicle for many of these use cases that were also potentially can be served by logs, but maybe not as well. And then there's a medium one, which is because of microservices, what you now require is also understanding the interactions between all the services. For example, when I go to Splunk and I run a query, I'm probably going through so many different hops. My request is going to, I don't know, 50, 100 different hops. Amazon's S3 service, the single storage service, has 130 microservices, just FYI.
Oh, wow.
It's extremely complicated, right? And so problems a lot of times don't happen within a microservice. It happens in the interactions between them, which is, again, like I said, you cannot just predict how many ways 130 microservices might interact with each other.
That's
So
very
you need
interesting.
to have
I
what
want
we
to underline
call-
that for a second. So
Yes.
you're saying that of the 130 services, to take your example of S3 here, there might be an issue that an end user or developer is seeing, but if I'm watching 130 microservices for the expected output, I would not see anything wrong a lot of the time. So that's
a lot
kind of
of
what you're
times that
saying?
happens.
Okay.
That is a lot of times that happens because one of the things that metrics isn't good at is it statistically things may not show up. So when I'm serving 1,000 requests and maybe 5 of them fail, it's a blip on the radar and things kind of look fine. I'm getting great output. But if you look at the 5 requests that failed, there are 5 unhappy users that just had the requests fail. So for them, it's like 100% failure, right?
Yeah.
And so the only way to really understand that is to be able to track transactions through these services to see how the individual experience is performing. This is the end user experience. That's what traces or what's traditionally application performance management, APM, tells you. And so we need all three. We need logs, we need metrics, and we need traces. One simple way to, I think that I like to make sense of it is metrics are like the canary in the coal mine. Like I can observe metrics and I can know, what, the P99 latency went up or the error rate went down or whatever. Like I can put metrics in dashboards, I can alert on them. It tells me when something is afoot. But where the problem is in a complex environment, that's what traces tell us, because I can see that, all the requests flowing through this node or this microservice seem to be failing. So it helps me identify maybe where the problem is. Now, if I want to know what the problem is, like why are those things failing? Maybe I want to look at call stacks and stack traces, etc. I have to go to logs, which is where the forensics lie, right?
Okay.
So you really need all three. And there's sometimes mention is also made of event data, like control rate events, like I made a push, I upgraded a version of software here. That's actually a degenerate case of using logs. Like logs can have high volume as well as low volume event data. So but we feel like those are the 3 types of data that you must have. And it's actually one of the reasons, in fact, Splunk acquired us is because in a way now we have a full suite of very, very strong products in all 3 categories, and which is, again, going to be very, very awesome for the customers.
So I have a very, very technical question. If everyone can get ready, really going to challenge Mr. CTO over here.
If you could open your code editor.
If with all of this, that means it's not going to be technical at all. If you didn't go with the name SignalFx, what was the next potential candidate name?
Yeah.
Ooh,
and if you can't
there was actually a different name before. SignalFx is not the first name we had.
I feel like I don't even know you now.
It was called SignalFx, and it was a placeholder name when the company was started.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Signal
I think
Fuse?
Fuse, 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 and some friends made fun of the name Fuse because it can get blown, and maybe
Yeah.
the product would
Oh.
fail or whatnot. References. But it was called SignalFx. It was a placeholder name, and by the time we sort of launched the product, which was about 2 years into the company, we had an internal vote. We had many different names. I don't forget all of them, but we all liked FX because techie nerds. F of X is algebraic functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the canonical way to specify some kind of mathematical or analytical process.
Mm-hmm.
And we take the signals and we do analytics on them, SignalFx, and it just appealed to all of us. It was actually owned by, I think, a Norwegian person who was out on a vacation in the woods somewhere. And
the name,
the
actual company name was already owned by someone else?
The domain signalfx.com was owned by somebody.
Wow.
And I, if I remember correctly, so we had to track the person down, and he agreed to sell it over to us, and we were all very happy. And that's how it ended up being SignalFx.
Nice.
It's funny.
Nice.
Did
So
you
I want
get
to
in
go
a
back.
situation where where you switched over the name and then realized, oh wait, we have to buy this from this guy, and if we can't get it?
No. Luckily, we thought those, at least our CEO did,
Yeah.
and it all worked out.
So I want to go back to scale a little bit and understand, okay, so we have, I'm no longer monitoring a server running a monolithic application. Now I'm thinking about, Kubernetes and public cloud services, and I have all these microservices spread out everywhere. What is the multiplier here? How many more entities am I having to track in a typical, small, medium, web scale
large
environment?
Right. So it's a fantastic question. I think the multiplier is at least 10 to 100 times at least. One thing I like to say is that it may not be so common to find, let's say, a company that runs 10,000 servers. That's a pretty decent amount. Obviously, Splunk is large. We run many more than that, and so did some of the other biggies. But 10,000 it's a hefty number,
it's
right?
Respectable. Mm-hmm.
But if you were to ask, go to San Francisco, wherever, I ask, who's running 10,000 containers, you'll find them a dime a dozen. And that's really, with virtualization and with containerization, this is really the name of the game. So what we are finding is, even though you may think, I'm not a Splunk or a Google, I don't need scalable monitoring system or whatnot. You kind of actually do, because the amount of observable entities in your environment is exploding. To the point where now, if you look at Kubernetes, the pattern is to run individual processes as containers, right? So you have a bunch of them in a pod.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them is an observable quantity, right? And sure, you can sort of try to be blind to them, and you'll pay the cost for it. So the number of quantities. The other thing that's also very interesting, which is actually a far more subtle problem, is with these modern environments, there's this thing called churn, which happens a lot. So, back in the day when I had a server, I probably leased it for 3 years, which is what Facebook used to do when I was there. And then after 3 years, it would go. So these things would run for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then came Amazon, where Amazon said, I'm going to give you this virtual machine, and maybe it runs for a few months, and I change it, or it gets retired or whatnot. Then come containers, and containers sometimes live for minutes, hours, days, right? Lambdas live for milliseconds. And then the problem is that I cannot forget what happened with these containers, because if I want to go back 6 months later, I would say, how was performance 6 months ago? How do I plan for this year's holiday season?
Yeah.
If I lose all the data, then I don't have anything to base my decision on. So which means that you have to keep a history of an ever increasing number of things that have all lived and died. You have to remember the history, like the Wayback Machine almost. And that is a huge problem, which it's a little bit, it's a little bit subtle, but it's very, very real. And we see a lot of customers or companies also struggling with that. It's not just how many are active now and how many have lived and died, right? So those are the two aspects that make it a very challenging problem.
Yeah, and then you got to think up a naming convention for your containers. That's, you're going to go through your favorite movies in the first, 10 minutes.
I mean, that's why you always use the periodic table, because you get a good amount there. Because why would you have more than what, 150 containers?
Yeah.
Mhm,
640K
exactly.
of RAM, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So, so as the so it sounds like you were at the end you were kind of talking about how, you know, companies of different sizes, you don't have to be web scale to need this type of approach is kind of your point.
Nope.
Okay.
Yep.
So are there things that so I heard you say APM before,
Mhm.
performance minute. Is this the SignalFx APM? Are they one and the same?
Yes, so we have APM as one of our offerings. So APM is typically understanding the, like I mentioned, the end user behavior or the how's my endpoints that are customer facing doing. So, right. So if I'm selling a product, when somebody wants to buy the product, are those transactions succeeding? How long are they taking, and so on? How are my transactions flowing through my environment? What are the dependencies? That's what APM gives you. But as I mentioned, you also need metrics to just do the sane, like bread and butter monitoring, understanding the high level, like what's the view of the entire environment, right? What are my canaries in the coal mine? What are the things that I should just observe from a holistic point of view, alert on? And then there's logs for forensics. So we SignalFx had metrics, which we call infrastructure monitoring product, basically the infrastructure side of things, applications, hosts, instances, and whatnot. And then the APM product, which was called microservices APM, because it was an offering that was optimized for sort of microservice environments where there are lots of little things as opposed to few large things, which is the traditional monolithic architecture. And then with Splunk, one of the things we're doing very rapidly is integrate logging capabilities into this. So make it a trifecta. It's a one-stop shop for customers. The reason it's very desirable from if I was a customer is there's really a multiplicity of tools that comes about to be, right? So if I'm using one tool for logs and another tool for metrics, another for APM, at some point, if they don't speak to each other very well, and if there's friction, you know, when I have to change context from A to B and learn two different, like it's very painful. And frankly, like developers, operators, they have their day job. Their job is not to learn to how like use tools that are really not their core business.
Right.
And so the more simple and smooth and integrated you can make it, the better it is. So that's really the goal.
Okay.
That we are
So
shooting.
I'm going to ask that something. It might be a hard question. I don't know, but I want to get your thoughts on it because it's you kind of led into it, which is people have their tools and their preferences, and at Splunk we have a thing called SPL. SignalFx evolved a different way to solve different challenges, but there's some overlap and understanding. You know, so how do you do analytics and ask open-ended types of questions against this data that's in SignalFx? And is it different fundamentally from SPL? Are there similarities?
One word, signal flow. So we also have a language.
Okay.
Not to be left behind. So what we did was, so we realized that again, analytics was going to be the key. It's not that, you know, I have storing a lot of data and I'm able to scale up my data store.
Anybody can pop up a dashboard.
Exactly. What you do with the data, the kind of questions you can ask of it, that's what's important. So we had a very big focus on analytics capabilities from beginning. And what we did was we actually have an analytics engine, which is this streaming analytics engine I spoke about. It's almost like it's very similar to the way Splunk's works, where, you know, Splunk's SPL has pipelines where you take the data, you do some modification, you pipe it to the next one, do some modification, and on and on. Extremely similar. It's a data flow language called Signal Flow. It looks very Pythonic. And so the idea is very similar. You have these pipelines where you query some data, apply some filters, do some transformations, do some aggregations, and on as much as you want. It's like Lego blocks. You just put them in whatever way you want. The other thing we have in Signal Flow is the ability to combine pipelines. So I can have pipeline A, I can have pipeline B, maybe one is cache hits and one is cache misses. And then you can do math involving, you can say A divided by B. And depending on how the data was grouped, maybe by data center or by whatever, by host, you do the, you know, the group-wise analytics when you do A divided by B and produce one or n results. And then what we did was this actually became a programming language, this Signal Flow, which has ability to, for example, include other Signal Flow functions from other people. It has ability for you to define functions that you can use, and there are libraries that we have. So it's actually very.
So the name SignalFx really has some meaning behind it in that sense.
There is totally, analytics is like the core part of the product. And that is also, you know, one of the reasons why this resonates a lot with a lot of the more modern shops is that they are moving towards what's called immutable infrastructure and code-driven deployments and whatnot, Terraform.
Infrastructure as code.
Infrastructure as code, right? And this is exactly where those guys, they're like, look, your UI is pretty and all, but I want to just do things programmatically through scripts, through APIs.
Mm-hmm.
And they love the expressibility of our language, because it just doesn't do one or two few things, but it's very flexible. You can do whatever your heart desires. It's obviously to some limit, but that's the idea.
So in your time working and creating and building out this, this excellent product that's now SignalFx, are there some of your favorite stories that you can share of customers that we can, that we can reference on? Obviously, got to be careful about what we say in a podcast forum, but any stories come to mind that just kind of like, wow, they did something really cool that, that surprised you?
Yeah, so for a while, this was years back, there was a customer called, I think, Clarivate Analytics. They were a part of Thomson Reuters, their patent arm. I don't know whether they're still customers or not, you will have to check. But when we went and talked to them, they were very sort of forward thinking as an organization, as also in terms of also their operations. And they were in a microservice environment, and they would push code pretty regularly, at least once a week, if maybe not more frequently. And what they said was, look, I want uptime is very important to me. So I want a very sort of high level KPI, like is my deployment, is my infrastructure healthy? I want a health score for everything. And if the health score is bad, I'm going to revert back and go to my previous version. And initially they had a team of engineers, at least a couple, if not more, who were writing a bunch of sort of, special scripts and so on, just customized for their use case to compute such a health score. And when they saw us, like the idea, just the lights just turned on and said, you know what, we think we can express whatever thing that we were sort of had these team building scripts for, just as signal flow program. And this is what they did. And this is very cool to me. Like, this is really an example of, what we say actually being reality. So it brings a great joy that they were able to do that. So that was a very interesting one. Another one was there's a large apparel manufacturer, which I shall name, in the Pacific Northwest, and they are moving to selling a lot of their product on the phone, like through applications. So they have these launches, where new product launches, where they're extremely popular. People like the millions will come and try to buy them, and their monitoring was 5 minutes behind, but by 4 or 5 minutes they probably sold through their inventory. So they wanted to know, like, are our users having a good experience? I know I can sell my shoes, but are there lots of failures? Is there unhappiness? And when they used us, it was like a night and day. Instead of knowing 5 minutes later, because they used a lot of lambdas and whatnot to scale up and down, they could see within seconds how things were going. So I hear that they used to have a team of 200 people in this big war room that was observing every release. It became like at least a fourth or a fifth of that number. They were able to do far more releases. That's actually real impact. Like these, again, digital businesses being able to sort of monitor effectively and well at scale in real time. That was also a very, very interesting one for me.
So
go ahead.
Okay. So how about a different perspective? Not a technical question per se, but was there a time while you were at SignalFx where it looked like it wasn't going to work out? Like the company wasn't you were fearing for the worst for the company?
Runway looking short.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this, or maybe everybody knows it, but life in a startup is usually that way.
It's usually like that, right?
It's like, it's like between two poles. Like one day you're feeling, my God, this thing is going to be fantastic. You look at all this promise and this opportunity. And the next day you might feel doom and gloom. And yes, happened, and multiple times. So that's actually one of the very valuable lessons. I don't know, maybe I'm a sucker for punishment, but I maybe signed up to go through this process. And when I signed up for SignalFx, but yes, it happens a lot because, as startups, deals, whether they happened or not, or a customer comes and suddenly says, you know what, I want this high bar of either scale or performance or whatnot, and you got to give me this. Sometimes you make it, sometimes you don't. Outages, something make you worried, like, is this thing gonna live? Like, how are we gonna deal with it? Fundraising is always a challenge. Like, you always have to fundraise, right?
Yeah.
And
just like
money
politics.
never runs for a whole. Yeah, exactly right, exactly right. And so yes, there were many moments. There were ups and downs. But one of the things I realized that if you get sucked into the middle of that, which you of course do to some extent, but if you what gives you relief is if you look at it from maybe a $10,000 or 30,000 foot view, is you see whether the overall indicators are positive or not. Maybe the path is like a very up and down like an earthquake, but as long as it's sort of going up and to the right, you feel that maybe let me have that sort of perspective that it's okay.
That's a good tip.
That's the best we can do. You build a good product, and then there will be customers, there will be companies that are interested. Something good would happen out of it, and so that was sort of a big, at least from an engineering point of view, that's how we looked at it, right? But yes, it was very, very scary in stages and then great in stages. It's just what
Awesome.
startup life is.
Excellent. So we're running short on time, and I want to be, very considerate about your time. But as we close, I want to think about, as a CTO of a startup, and it's we're at the beginning of 2020 here. What are your thoughts of not technology in general necessarily, unless you really want to go wide, but what are you thinking about in terms of what SignalFx can do over the next couple of years, and how do you see that panning out?
Yeah, so high level, I'm cautiously extremely optimistic. So I feel that everybody wants their how did we affect the world, so to speak. I feel SignalFx has a chance to make the sort of modern web-based digital economy more successful, because what we're providing is a way for you to operate these very complex environments with confidence and provide a high quality of service to your customers, whether they be other enterprises or consumers, right? This is key because we all know how innovation is speeding up, and all of that is because of lots of these changing. DevOps models are changing, and deployment models are changing, development, all of these are changing. I feel that we are an enabling technology to that. Not that we are the only one. Monitoring and observability is one of them, but it's a very important one, right? So I feel that the kind of impact we can have in general on the world is huge. So I'm very optimistic about it. The other thing I feel is also because of the quality of the product, we are building one of the maybe very few all-around suites, which I think is going to be very, very excellent, because I think the name of the game over time is going to be consolidation, where customers, because of this the tool, there's so many tools out there, they will want to select few integrated tools. And our goal actually right now is to figure out how do we make that happen effectively and economically for customers. So high level, like I said, I really do believe in this mission. I feel there's a huge amount of opportunity, and it's really all about execution from our point. So
yeah, it's exciting.
Very optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually in the vein of looking forward, one thing I think we skipped over is so you were CTO when SignalFx was on its own. What is your job title now?
I'm a distinguished architect. Basically, I'm part of the engineering organization, and my goal is to basically figure out that this vision, along with others, of course, I'm obviously not the only one by far, is realized, at least from technical point of view. I also obviously do spend a lot of time with customers and prospects, as well as with evangelism and marketing, because you also have to spread the word along with building the product. So I'm a little bit, I have a feet in a few different parts, but primarily it's architecture.
Wow. Well, thank you. Well, we're right up on time here. I think this was a mind-blowing discussion that we had here. For anyone who has observed this episode of the podcast. So with that, thank you all for listening. Thank you to our special guest, and to all of our globalers out there. Keep on globalering.
That was awful, but thank you, Birch. Thank you, Arijit.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you again.
All right.